There we go. Let's get going.
Excellent.
There you go.
All right. Excellent. Welcome everyone to tonight's call. Um, this call is being recorded, so it will be part of the catalog there in school. So for those of you who have joined us, thank you. For those who are watching on the recording, this is going to be very interesting tonight. We're joined by Serena, um, Serena Grewal from Hampshire Trust Bank. She's my relationship manager there. As you know, besides Property Lifestyle Network, I also run a specialist mortgage firm, and we do a lot of complex lending with Hampshire Trust Bank. Okay. Now Serena's given up her time tonight. She's going to talk and answer some questions that we've already had, but it is really talking about specialist lending tonight. Okay, this is what we're going to be talking about and covering. Um, as a lot of you will be dealing with multi-unit blocks, you'll be looking at long-term contracts, housing associations. For those of you who are abroad investing in the UK, Hampshire Trust Bank is one of those lenders that they can do almost everything, as we found out, Serena. Some things they
Yeah.
can't do, but they are a specialist lender, and are catered to the unique properties, the unique deals. So, excellent, Serena. Thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So, I don't know if you want to just give a quick, summary of Hampshire Trust Bank, a little bit better than what I've said.
It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. So no, yeah. So you summarised it, a specialist lender. So when we say specialist, essentially it's where like the high street wouldn't have the appetite to, for example, to lend, whether that's a type of asset or type of client. So there's, several specialist lenders. We in particular are keen to help new landlords, existing landlords, those who want to refurb properties, semi-commercial HMOs, like multi-units, which Gareth mentioned. So we're very broad in the asset type, which we're happy to lend on, but also ownership. So what I mean by that, a lot of you who are investing or looking to invest, well, I think the first question will be, should I, do it in my personal name, should in a limited company or SPV? And we're fine with those structures, but there's even more, I guess, complex and potentially beneficial structures like BVI companies, trusts, LLP. So we pretty much cover all those ownership types and assets. So what I'm thinking to do is I'll run through what we're particularly good at, and then I'm happy to sort of open it up if you've got any questions. So the first thing I was going to start off with is what we're busy with at the moment. So obviously we're in February now, and we've actually had a really good start to the year, which I think is going to be very positive for this industry. So I think for those investing in property, looking to get returns of property, it looks to be a very positive year. The first key sort of transaction we're doing, we refer to is like below market value transactions, under market, some people call it. Essentially, let's say you see a property for sale. Now, it could be anything. It could be a block of flats. It could be a house converted into flats. It just could be one house, a flat. And you know that it's going for less than it would if it was an open market. So it could be a landlord's retiring, they're getting, rid of their assets, and they want to move it quickly. You might know the person. It might be an auction purchase. There's so many different variables, but in essence, what it is, you're getting it below the actual value. Now, the reason this is beneficial is we as a lender, I refer to it as term lending, just means sort of a 2 or 5 year fixed rate. We will lend on 90% of the purchase price or 75% of the open market value. So what it means is, as an investor, you're having to put in less of your cash, but actually you're benefiting some of the equity in the property, even though it's a brand new purchase. So these are really popular at the moment. I'm doing quite a few for actually a landlord who is retiring, and another landlord who isn't retiring is buying a lot of his assets these happen to be houses turned into flats. And the model we're doing here is we're buying these on a bridge. So, you know, it's good to do your research and have your knowledge. There are several bridging lenders that offer the 90% of purchase price or 75% open market value. We are not the only ones, but we are the only ones doing on a term loan. So that is one of our USPs. But the reason you would choose, for example, a bridge over a term in this example is if you are adding value yourselves. So it might be, you know, a particular area, you know, this house is going to be absolutely perfect to turn into a HMO, for example. You might be a neighbor, you might know the person. So you're like, yeah, I'm going to get this off market. I'm then going to turn it into HMO. And then I'm going to go on to, you know, a standard term mortgage. So there's so many different things you can do to HMOs. It could just be a light refurb. So the ones we're doing currently, the landlord is now elderly, so he hasn't updated the properties. He hasn't increased the rent either because his portfolio is so large. He just hasn't needed to really. So the opportunity for the landlord that's lending with us is he's going in, doing some cosmetic work, increasing all the rents. So the yield's going up and the value's going up. And he's just going to be doing sort of like kitchens, bathrooms, and just modernize and essentially get more professional tenants in and paying, you know, a higher rent for those assets. So that's one model. Of course, I'm sure you guys know about auction purchase as well. Again, it's very much around the numbers and making sure the numbers work. But if you know, again, there's a certain property that is going way below market value, it might be an option to bridge that, just because bridging's quicker than term loans in that example. So you would use that. And again, you might keep it, you might flip it. There's so many different models, but we are one of the few lenders that offer it on a term basis.
I think we also just need to caveat that, Serena, that to get it on a term basis, the properties need to be in a lettable condition. So
absolutely,
a lot of a lot of times you have to go with the bridge because the properties don't have a up-to-date EPC. They don't, you know, there's huge damp problems. There's no kitchen, no bathrooms, etc. So even on that below market value, you'd have to go onto a bridge where on the term, if the property is in a lettable condition.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry. Term is of course for lettable condition. Bridges are often like not habitable or improvements. So yeah, and then two other things I thought was good to mention. So we have also seen an uplift in landlords looking to invest in semi-commercial properties. So I guess that what we would see is a traditional, let's say a house, two up, two down, which, you know, used to be the traditional model, isn't necessarily working on a yield basis, although it does depend, you know, where you're investing in the country. That does sometimes work sort of the further north you go. So semi-commercial investment. So you don't actually need any existing experience with us to invest in a semi-commercial asset. But the reason why they're more attractive in some cases is you're getting a tenant obviously upstairs on an AST. A lot of the time, these assets are like in a high street, you know, so for a tenant, it's a good location because they can get good transport, they make work in the high street. So from a tenant basis, that works. And then you could obviously have a commercial tenant downstairs. We at Hampshire Trust are fine with any commercial tenant. So we're fine with sort of like takeaways, laundrettes. Again, also, you know, do your research into what's a good tenant. It could be an existing tenant. It could be someone with a track record. So that's pretty easy to check the credibility and if you're happy to keep them on. Of course, if you get like a golden nugget, like, I don't know, like a Starbucks or, you know, one of these blue chip companies, then of course you get great returns on those types of assets. But even so, sometimes, you know, a smaller self-employed business below, it makes sense, you know, if they're established and the numbers stack up. So the returns on semi-commercial again are in comparison to some buy-to-lets quite popular, and we've seen a lot of investors now change the strategy to semi-commercial. So that's another one. And then I think I was discussing this with Gareth, another very popular strategy is assisted living, supported living, and social housing. So I would say it's probably been the last sort of 18 months or so, and it is massively, massively increased. Now, as I guess as lenders, I do think our criteria as a whole has improved. But again, it isn't across the board that they're necessarily comfortable with those tenants in the properties. I actually think it's probably just a lack of experience or knowledge. So they, currently not the whole market does that, but we specialize in that. So I'll give you some real life examples. So the three sort of bigger companies where they'll potentially home asylum seekers or anyone with some vulnerable needs. You may have heard of like Serco, Mears, and Clear Springs. So we are fine with agreements to those companies. The length varies. You can have 5 years. I think the longest I've seen has been a 25-year lease. So we as a lender are absolutely fine with the longer leases in place. Of course, do due diligence around the terms and conditions, but as a lender, we're absolutely fine. We see that ultimately these end tenants need quality places to live and reside, and there aren't enough, and therefore that's why there is a huge demand. And you may even notice sometimes the actual you'll get higher than market rent because Serco, Mears, and Clear Springs, they just have a huge waiting list. They don't have enough assets on their books, and they essentially need more assets. So they will typically give a FRA, which is a full repair and insurance lease agreement. So what that means as a property owner is you hand it off and they take care of the property, like they're meant to give it back to you in the same condition. So it's a very hands-off approach, which I think is particularly useful if you're possibly working full-time elsewhere, or you might have some development, or you've got other things that are taking up your time. Then that is a very good strategy, and we see a lot of landlords going down that route because it just takes, I guess, the time and the headache of all the admin of dealing with tenants off your shoulders. You're pretty much getting a guaranteed rent, and it works for all involved. Then you've got assisted living and supported living. So these would typically be like normal houses, normal flats, and sometimes there is an element of care, but they are not care homes. It could be like a tenant who potentially has some mental health issues or some like learning difficulties, and they're able to live independently but not fully independently. So potentially carers coming around and making sure they're okay. So again, we are absolutely fine with that type of arrangement. Again, there's a huge demand for those types of properties, and not all are appropriate. It depends on the level of care, but the key there is making relationships with those providers and understanding really what their needs are, what types of properties, what sort of standards are they looking for, and to work closely with them. Now, we at Hampshire Trust, we have 2 lists that we use, which I'm more than happy to share. One would be the CQC website, which is the Care Quality Commission. Now, that would basically list all the companies, and what we would hope is if you found that was a route you wanted to go down, we would go on there and just check that the company has a good rating, in essence, so that the care they're providing and the people they're looking after is good or above. We wouldn't lend if it was not adequate, because I guess common sense, that's not up to standard. So we wouldn't, but there's a lot on there, and there's some great companies that do great things in helping the community. So that would be one option. And then the next one, which I think Gareth mentioned, is around social housing. So these will be housing associations. So that's the link. So a lot of boroughs have stopped adding new housing associations because you could set up as one, and you would essentially get those people in like temporary housing, it, it could be anything. It could be someone fleeing for like domestic violence, those, I guess, again, vulnerable people that need to be placed somewhere. There's, again, very different models. You've got some that's like temporary housing. So the council will pay per night to have a property, and that would obviously be on a temporary basis, and you would have obviously different tenants coming through that type of property. You would then have more longer term tenants, so it could be like families, and they would reside in your property. So there's different techniques. Some councils do it direct, and then some will do it direct and also utilize the social housing providers in their borough. So again, I think it's very much relationship based, and if you know someone there, you can work together to both help the community and ultimately as well get a return on your investment. So that is another popular option also. And then I think it's probably worth touching upon, I don't know if anyone on the call now or I guess on the recording, Hampshire Trust as well. We do lend to experienced and inexperienced. Our criteria just slightly varies, but also we do lend to foreign nationals. So if people abroad like to, I think in England there is I would say our property market, there is a demand for it. It is seen as steady. So we do get a lot of foreign nationals who wish to just invest and use those assets for buy to let or social housing or the different models. So I'm hoping that's enough information. I think the way we generally work is case by case. So, if you have a specific case or a specific example and you want to look at the numbers and look at the information and discuss, the model you're going to go down, more than happy to do that. I mean, Hampshire Trust, we are, you have to go via a broker to use us, but certainly, Gareth is very experienced, he knows what he's doing. So he would have all the facts and figures, and if there's anything we need clarity on, we can obviously have a conversation, but more than happy to have a look at, lease agreements or assets, if they think they're suitable. And I think actually another great thing that can be done just from a knowledge point when you're investing is speak to a valuer. So I had a meeting yesterday and I invited a valuer out because we've got this, I don't know why, we're sort of like afraid to speak to them, but actually we are so reliant upon valuers when it comes to the numbers and the numbers working in the way that I guess you hope it to be and the end result. So at Hampshire Trust, we only use specialist valuers. So what I mean by that is a lot of lenders will use, I guess I describe it as vanilla valuers, which are perfectly fine for just a normal house, a normal flat. So it would be the likes of like Countrywide, eServe, and they're great at what they do, but they just look at bricks and mortar. That is it. That's a bread and butter. They're brilliant at it, but anything else would not essentially be their cup of tea. So we work with a wide variety, but we have VAS, appraisal, and method, which they're actually panels of valuers, and then it goes out and you can get quotes. Now, this particular valuer, what I said to him is, we go out and we expect a certain end GDV. Let's just say you're doing a HMO, for example. And what I said to him is, is it okay for people to have a conversation with you to say, where do we get these figures from, or what standard does it need to be done? Because of course you've got completely different standards. If, for example, your entrance can be a student, vulnerable, high and professional, the finish is going to be different. The demand in the local area, you've got to have an understanding. And we had a good conversation, and he even actually said himself, I said, could the client or whoever meets you at the property bring comparables with them, because obviously you've done research to invest in this property and you've used these facts and figures to understand actually this is a type of finish, this is a type of tenant, and these are the returns I'm looking for. And I said, would that be useful? And he was like, yeah, absolutely, bring the comparables of where you've got this information and what you've based it on, because even as a lender, we're very much reliant upon what the valuer tells us being the end value, the market rent as well. So there's no harm, certainly for your bigger projects, to have a conversation with a local valuer and just have that open chat and just be like, look, I'm thinking of doing, 6 bed, 6 ensuite, would that get an investment valuation? Because I had one where it's a 6 bed. They didn't go for 6 ensuite. They just went for, like a basin in the actual room, and then they were sharing 2 bathrooms. And I was discussing it with a broker, and they were like, would that get investment valuation? And I just asked the valuer. I was like, would you think it would? And he was like, no, that wouldn't justify an investment valuation. He was like, he certainly thinks the tenants would appreciate, I guess, having running water, and it's useful, but that wouldn't warrant an investment valuation. So it's just really being on the same page and being transparent.
Was that valuer Colin by any chance, or?
No.
Okay, no, that's right. One of the HTB relationship manager's husband owns a nationwide valuation company, so I was just asking that. But I think that brings us actually onto a question that a lot of people have asked about, and I think they're curious to know the answers. Is how do you get that investment valuation? Because with Hampshire Trust Bank, you can get a bricks and mortar valuation, and you can request a commercial valuation, especially when you're going down the HMO route. What are the key things that they should be looking at where they're most likely to get an HMO valuation? I know it's never guaranteed; it always goes down to valuer's discretion. But what are you looking for a property to warrant a commercial investment valuation?
Yeah, so I think we've given guidance, and I would say we were pretty confident to say if it's a 6 bedroom, 6 ensuite, certainly if it's an Article 4 area, that would warrant it. But we also like to use a bit of common sense. I've had cases where we said, okay, it's a 5 bed. There's not space to make it a 6 bed. So we've gone for a 5, high-end finish, 5 ensuites. And we have got investment valuations, because what we've said is, if you compare that property to all the houses on that road, like, the normal residential home, the amount of investment that's gone into it does justify that. What you certainly won't get investment valuations on is if I buy, I don't know, a 4-bedroom house, and that 4-bedroom house, I add another bedroom, so I go into the loft, so I've made it now a 5 bed, and I have like 3 bathrooms, but every other house is a 4-bed, 3-bath. That does not warrant an investment valuation, essentially, because it's very similar to the residential properties. You haven't really added any value. So, but again, I think it's about comparables and just knowing your stuff about the location, the area. You might know other people. Have a little nose around at other HMOs. Honestly, that's what I would go there, look at the finish. If you want to, not I'm saying do this, but sort of thing I would do is, if I do know there's a HMO in my area, and they're not my competition, but indirectly they are, because you're doing a very similar type of asset, I would probably see if I can view it. But again, if they've got it in a company, you can see who the lender is on Companies House. You can see if it's a specialist lender, if there's there's so many things that can be done. And I think it's very much about research. So I would say, just to clarify, the 6-bedroom, 6 ensuite all day long. And we do it on semi-commercial assets as well. Certainly the larger HMOs, I think the largest one I've done has been like a 20-bed HMO. I mean, that will certainly get an investment valuation, all day long. So
multiple kitchens, if 6 beds all en suite with a couple of them as studios with little kitchenettes.
That'll get investment. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everyone loves a kitchenette. Firstly, it's more appealing to tenants. Again, think of yourself as a tenant. If you had to live somewhere, would you choose a HMO that just has a basic room and you've got to share a bathroom, or would you pay that little bit extra and have a little kitchenette so you can have your tea and your coffee, and you've got your own shower? It's it's using that sort of common sense approach, really, and be like, well, that will warrant a higher yield. But again, finish is really important as well, because we see completely different finishes, some extremely high end, but again, it depends on your end tenant. So it's very much based on that, you know. Some student lets that we see, like HMOs and student, towns and cities, again, the finish probably isn't as good. However, saying that, they're always rented out, they've always got the demand, and it's perfectly fine for students. They're probably out all the time anyway, I guess. Partly they're not in the property much, so it's fine. So I think it's understanding the ultimate tenant base, and then sort of working backwards, and definitely use data and research. I think we're very lucky. We've got a lot of tools now that we can use to find out property values, think what it's sold for. There's a lot of data out there that you can utilize. But yeah, I think even speaking of valuers is actually invaluable. And I actually had no existing relationship with this valuer, and I just asked him to come out and meet for a coffee, and he was very lovely, and he was more than happy to speak to brokers direct. And I was like, would you be comfortable discussing particular cases, and just getting a direction from the person who's actually going to put a value to it? And he was like, absolutely. But they usually specialize in areas. So I mean, this particular one was down in Portsmouth, and his knowledge was really around student lets. So again, valuers have general different areas of expertise, I would say.
No, perfect. So yeah, look, we've used Nova, we've used HTB for many years, and we've done some really creative things. We've done a lot of things where clients, we've got a few actually going through right now with 20-year leases on there. The things you don't really like anything Ofsted related. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, that is correct. Yeah. So I guess going down the care route, another popular model, again, is a really lovely model, very, again, help the community. So it would be like children's care homes in essence. So I would say it's quite a specialist area. We have personally decided not to go into that unless the children are above 16 years of age. So are they really teenagers, obviously, at that point? So we would consider that. But if we're talking about younger children, again, there's maybe a handful of lenders that would be keen to help. We've decided not to enter that market, just because not only have you got the care side, which is a CQC, you've then got another added layer of Ofsted. So it just makes it a little bit more complicated. And honestly, as a lender, our area and knowledge is not in that area. So again, could work perfectly well if that is the model and that's what you want to do. And what I also really love is morally, you are genuinely helping children. So I love the idea. I love people who are doing it. But yeah, it's, for us as a lender, it isn't one, just because it's got another sort of level of legal requirements. Which then, just unless you really know what you're doing or have experience or know someone who can help you, it's a bit of a minefield for us.
Perfect. Well, like I said, we've done a lot of weird and wonderful things, and may it continue. So look, if we can just open up, if anyone does have any questions, I know, Serena, if you don't mind answering a few questions, if anyone's got anything.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. So I am so I've got a 6-bed, 6-ensuite with 3, they're not kitchenettes, but they're coffee stations, so no cooking facilities.
Yeah.
And I've done some analysis, and at the moment, I'm not too sure if I will get a better valuation on bricks and mortar, or I will get a better valuation on commercial, or you refer it as investment value.
Yeah.
So what do I, and also I've also tried to get an independent valuer to come out, and I've phoned up the VAS panel, and I was happy to pay, but they say we are not instructed by landlords, we are strictly instructed by lenders. So I was not able to get any input from that side. So what would you advise?
Okay. Love the research, by the way. That is very good. Roughly, where is the property based?
Lincolnshire.
Okay. So what I could do, if you would find it useful, I can potentially get some valuers' contact details because it's not really a lender answer, I guess. It's a valuer. typically, the reason why anyone wants an investment valuation. So when I say investments, it's to do with the yields. So what they're saying is, if all those rooms that you've done to very nice standard are rented up X amount, they're going to use that yield to work backwards to then look at the end property value. Whereas bricks and mortar is just treated like a normal residential home, even though it clearly isn't. They're just sort of looking at it as that. So technically, investment valuations should always be higher. That is the purpose of them. They are yield based, and therefore people always push for an investment valuation, because essentially the property goes up and you can take more money out. That is the I guess the goal, and why a lot of people do HMOs. So I think really to get to the bottom of that, I guess an indication for you and how you're going to move forward is to have a direct conversation with valuers. So what I could do, I'll give it to Gareth and he'll give it to you, but I can give you a list. If you can just give me give it to Gareth, the postcode, I will get you a list. And then you don't need to go via VAS, because VAS are correct. They're a panel manager. They're in between. They're not actually they're not a valuer themselves. They're a panel. So they're there to protect the lender. So they work for us. But every time I've spoken to valuer personally, and they've been very useful. So I think it's going to direct. So I'll find out once you get the postcode, get your 3 names, numbers, and just have an honest chat and say, this is standard. This is what I've done. You're not sort of holding them to that, but it's like, would I get an investment? And you can ask them, what yield are you basing it on? And with that, you can work backwards on what the value would roughly be. Yeah. Have you got any comparables? Has anyone done anything similar to what you've done nearby?
Yes. I mean, it's all in the yield. So if we get anything below 11, then definitely commercial vow or the investment valuation, it makes a lot of sense. But because it's Lincolnshire, it's not, and it's not a huge town, I'm worried that we're going to get above 11 and then it just doesn't make sense. Then almost bricks and mortar is better. So I think what we are doing at the minute is we actually submitting for a bricks and mortar mortgage, seeing what that comes out as. If that's not going to be good enough, then we'll swap and do a new application. So it's not great. We would have liked to have this detail beforehand, but
do you know what? Honestly, it just comes with experience. I've personally been in mortgage for 17 years. I am still always learning. Like, I don't think it's a stage where you're like, oh, I know it all. Like, it's constantly changing, criteria, stuff's changing all the time. So no, I think don't take it as a negative. It's a learning curve. But I'm more than happy if, that valuation doesn't get to where you need, because I think if they're doing bricks and mortar, they're going to treat it as a normal home. If you don't, then I think certainly speak to some more specialist valuers who they do HMOs day in, day out. That's what they do. That's their area of expertise, and they'll probably know straight away, this is the yield, this is roughly, and I think that will probably then give you an indication of what you want to do next.
Okay, let's do that, Gareth.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else have any questions at all?
Yeah, yes, I do. A couple from David. One is a bit basic, really, on criteria for lending. I've set up a new limited company in May of last year. So I don't have 12 months books. Well, I don't have any books at the moment to put forward. And but I do have some assets in that business. So got a few houses, portfolio of houses that are being built with no mortgage. So if I wanted to remortgage those properties, what would your criteria for lending? Is it just against the asset? Would I need 12 months worth of books? What would your criteria? Would I be okay now, or would I have to wait for at least a year?
No, you're absolutely fine. So no, it's a really good question, actually. So as a specialist lender and as a buy-to-let HMO lender, we do not have a minimum of 12 months. Usually, I would say that criteria is sort of more like for residential mortgages, for a track record of your affordability. In essence, just really bluntly, we base it on the value of the asset. So we could go to 75% of the value of any asset, subject to the rental income. And that could be, again, we don't need 12 months. Like, for example, if you just built something just now and it's just completed, you've got building sign off and you're gonna get tenants in 2-3 months, as long as it's tenanted for completion, because obviously that covers our interest, we're fine. So we're very, very flexible. So yeah, don't need a history there. All we would want to see, of course, is if or when the tax is due for rental, then that, so again, you haven't had the 12 months, but that is the only thing to be aware of. It sounds really obvious, but there are some people that unfortunately don't always declare the rental income, and then that obviously causes a problem because we can see it, and you got to pay the right relevant taxes that you need to.
I think also something that you guys are good at, Serena, is a day one remortgage. So technically, David, even if you buy a property today for £100,000, it's worth £150,000 tomorrow. Hampshire Trust Bank can lend on that £150,000 value. So yeah, it's great if you can find those, but yes.
Indeed.
Just need a few of those a year and we're fine, aren't we?
Gareth, in this example, how do you buy the house? You buy it cash effectively. Is that what you're saying? Then you refurbish
well, we've done that before with HDB, where we buy it on a bridge. So just for example, you're buying a below market value that we were talking about, or even you're buying a property, you go and you're going to go do some work on the property, and you've increased the value. You buy it on a bridge, you go do the work, and we can refinance it a few weeks later. But likewise, if you're buying something you've got a really good deal on something. What HB look at is something called a arm's length transaction, generally speaking. So what that means is you're not buying it, forcing someone to sell it to you to sell it to you at a below market deal side of it. But yes, you can buy. Sometimes you can just win at an auction where no one bid on it for some reason, and you've won on it. You've done no work for it, but you bought a property that's worth 400 grand. You bought it for 300,000 because you're the only one who bid it. You can buy it on that bridge, or and then refinance it literally the next day with them, turn it onto a term product at the higher value. So you don't even need to necessarily do work. It's based on the open market value of the property, correct? So yeah, I'm pretty sure I know your policy very, very well.
For HDB. Yeah. No, that is fine.
So yeah.
Okay. And the second question was, so let's say you've got a portfolio of 10 houses and you wanted to borrow some money. Would you lend against individual houses or against a portfolio? And what would be better for, I guess, the client and the bank?
It's actually a personal choice. So again, I can speak on Hampshire Trust, but again, lenders are different. So I can do either. So I have lent on a portfolio. So it would be in one lending entity. So like one limited company or SPV. I've then taken all the properties in that company. I've lent 75%. It's one loan, but it's secured against all of them. Now, I would say that's beneficial if you're trying to maximize what you're trying to pull out of those assets. That is why you would choose to do that. If you don't need to maximize, so let's just say, I don't know, that the amount you only need to give half, less than half, or whatever, you don't, then personally as a client, so if it was my own portfolio, there is no reason to give more than you need to, honestly, because what it will mean is we will have a first charge on it. If you want to do anything else, you have to get that permission. So I think it's first understanding the amount that you need and then really giving the least that you can get away with, because then that gives you choice and freedom on the other assets. If you want to, you can later date remortgage those and pull it out of that. There's nothing stopping you, but you've got no one to answer to in a way because there is no charge on there. So So that is how I would certainly look at it from a client basis.
That's very useful.
If
Thank
it's
you, Serena.
lender, I'll take them all in 75%. But no, I think, yeah, I think that being honest, that is how I would advise that anyway. I don't think it's the right thing to take.
Some people like having just one direct debit, and they want one loan against that, and it's useful. So we've got one client now, David, that we're doing with HDB, where he's got about 30 properties with about 1 million missed payments. We needed the client to get his credit score above 750 so they can look at it. But he wanted to consolidate from having 30 direct debits, 30 different loans into one facility. So they can do it that way. So yeah, it's personal choice. But where it is very useful is if you're looking at trying to buy a portfolio of properties where you're trying to buy something, especially that's below market value, what you can do is you can buy it perhaps even on a term or even on the term there, and then you can slowly start remortgaging them out at a later date onto individual lending options, should you wish.
Yeah. But Gareth, in this instance, let's say you bought something for 100 on a bridge, and then on day one you remortgage onto term loan, but it's not. So I do HMOs, but it's not an HMO yet, so you can't really do that. You need to convert it into C4 first of all, right? And then you can get an HMO term product. Okay, fine.
So we do quite a lot of those. So what we particularly do on those, if you see an asset, I don't know, let's just say it's a normal 3-bed house, but you know it's got the space, or you do an extension to turn it into a 6-bed, you could purchase it on the bridge. Once you've got, so let's say it needs planning, right? So you then go off, get the relevant planning in place. You then come back to us, and we call it a heavy refurb bridge. So it's designed for HMOs and converting properties. We can then lend on the GDV. So the value will say, okay, you've got planning now. This 6-bed, 6 ensuite that you're going to do is going to be worth this. And then we can lend up to 75% of that and fund the works to convert it. And then once you've done it all, that's all on a bridge. And then once it's fully complete, then you can then go to any term lender, pay off what you're owing us, and then just, rent it out as usual. So yeah, that is quite a popular method. But also, just to not be negative, but I guess be realistic, is if for any reason you didn't get planning, obviously have a plan B. So, for example, if you went in for a 6-bed, 6 ensuite, and for whatever reason the council no, I don't know, the room's small, or whatever they're saying, you've got to have a plan B. So it might be like, okay, I'll do a 5-bed, or I'll refurb and flip it. The option, think of the options, but we're happy to work alongside you on those options in essence, so that you're not stuck. You have got plan A, you have got a plan B.
Brilliant, thank you. I think is there anyone for the last question before we say thank you to Serena, or anyone? No? Excellent. Well, I think Serena, we'll just say thank you for that for tonight. Like I said, this go back, have a look at this recording. If you've got any questions about HB, if you've got any interesting finance related questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. Pop a message on the school platform. If I can't answer it, I'll reach out through to Serena so she can answer it. But thank you, Serena, for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. And for everyone for joining the call tonight, thank you very much. I hope you all have a great evening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Perfect.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Serena.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.